So whatever I say is perfect. And you know that already. That was awesome. I was like, oh good, whatever it said is perfect. I do everything with a cup of coffee. Don't mind. Perfect. What's wrong with you? What were you thinking? Those are really powerful statements for me, and I hope that you got that when I said that. What's wrong with you? Have you ever said that? Who has said that? What were you thinking? Who has said that? Who has said that about yourselves? What is wrong with me? What was I thinking? Recently I saw a video of Reverend Michael Beckwith, and he talked about this emblem that sometimes we wear. It's an emblem of old ideas. And I have really kind of no clue what he said before and after that, because that just resonated with me. That and the creative process. I'm a big fan, I think that as we all are, of the creative process. And I'm also a vivid thinker. And so I have to admit, I didn't do enough research. I realized that while sitting here. That, you know, that picture of the guy, there's a circle, it's a circle, I'm sure Josh or Rick, you know, it's just, no pressure though, guys. And it's a circle with a guy standing in the middle like this. I think he's got an afro, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Anyways, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure.
What is that called? Anybody know?
Guy with an afro.
Guy with an afro. I picture that a lot. That's my version of the emblem of the creative process. I picture it a lot because I like to try to put myself within that circle rather than it being outside. Again, I'm vivid, and that's a tool for me. I guess we could call that a spiritual practice, because anything that I consider anything that unites me to the truth and grows my awareness and my consciousness is a spiritual practice. And so that picture is perfect for me because his mind is up on top, his head, you know, and what we think is basically what we're going to experience. I mean, that's the fast track, right? I remember when I got my license late. I was 18 years old, my driver's license, and I was kind of a klutz really growing up. Well, it turned into a car situation, so I got in a lot of car accidents, and that sounds really dramatic, and kind of, I suppose, if you saw the cars themselves, you would say, well, she got in a dramatic car accident, but I kind of got used to going, it really wasn't that dramatic. I mean, the car looks a lot worse than what I experienced, but I remember having this conversation. And I literally totaled 3 or 4 cars in a matter of a couple of years. And I remember saying to my mom at the time, you know, the one I haven't gotten in is the rear end. I haven't been hit from behind. And she said to me, Tina, you got to stop thinking about getting hit. If you stop thinking about getting hit, you're like going to stop getting hit. And I don't know why that made sense to me, but I did, and it stopped. And it's always left a lasting impression. So really, I think my mom kind of gave me the creative process without going real deep or wordy. And I applied that, and ever since I've always kind of, you know, really believed in what my thoughts were is what I experienced. What I didn't make the connection to, though, until, you know, more recently, was love with a capital L, and circulation, and connection, and all that those God qualities encompass within that circle. I mean, it's a really, if you think about it, it's a really rich circle. It's not just a circle. It's just filled with all of this really endless stuff, this endless goodness. We say things like divine intelligence and divine creativity, and we mean this ultimate, unending, this infinite, invisible amount of whatever it is that you put in that circle. But if you just get wider on that, it just can blow your mind on just all the things, that are in there. And I really like the word love. I really do, because it kind of sums all of that up for me. But that love is life, and I know that, all my friends are kind of sick of that with me, but still tolerate it because it just makes so much sense to me, that anything that is living is caused by love. And then anything that, I experience that's tangible was originally caused by love. And the more I nurture that is within me, which is this thing, this place, this being that is unique and that expresses this one, this big, huge, ultimate love, it expresses it through here, this place within me that's perfect, whole, and complete. This thing, love. When I'm nurturing that, what comes natural to me and sustaining, which is a really big word to me, it's very important, is my relationship with you and my relationship with my life and then your life and the world around me. But it starts for me within this creative process, within the self, which for me is my essence, is who I am at the core. And so, I start off with those questions, what were you thinking? And what's wrong with you? Those two questions happen to be on that emblem of mine. And they're kind of getting, brushed out. I would have to say that it's kind of like, a sci-fi movie where the wording is not engraved so deeply. And I think it will take practice for it to actually disappear. And that's what it's all about, is a practice, right? But as soon as I go there to that old idea of who I am, that shame or that definition that, I'm not good enough, or most importantly, for me specifically, it's basically, what do you think about me, and seeking some type of validation outside this circle, right? And then I start to drift away from this place of connection with life, and connection with love, and connection with circulation. And I'm really useless to you at that point, because I'm useless to myself at that point. And so I try to stay away from those two things. But what I will bring to the table tonight in our spiritual practice is the idea, I'm giving you a sneak peek, is the idea of, I like to shine the light on the negativity. I like to shine the light on fear. I like to shine the light on anything that opposes my truth of who I am, so that I can be real clear on what it is that's trying to sneak its way into my consciousness. So what is wrong with me has turned into a joke for me with my friends and everything. I mean, we'll say it just as a joke, but it's also a message, in my world, is you don't have to go there. There's nothing wrong with you. We are perfect, whole, and complete. Absolutely nothing wrong. Fear is something I shine the light on. I actually kind of give it a little present. Sometimes if I can't get myself out of it quickly enough, I just picture myself walking beside it. I'm like, well, if you're not going to go away, then you're going to have to walk beside me. You can't hang out in my head, but you can walk right here. And those are just some of the tools that I consciously use, for my mind throughout the day. Like Donna was saying, these spiritual practices for me, I do have my time in the morning, but I try to pretty much bring them with me all day long. Because what's important to me is my life, is what I'm creating, is how I feel, and is my relationship with you. Definitely the results in my life in tangible form and all of that, and peace. But what I've come to really find most important to me is my relationship with myself and then I have this relationship with you that I didn't know was possible. So I've got a quote here from Ernest Holmes. If we try to find something difficult to grasp, then we shall never grasp it, because we shall always think of it as being incomprehensible. The mind which we discover within us is the mind which governs everything. This is the theme itself, and we should recognize it. And we should recognize its simplicity. And the first time I read that, this is out of The Essentials of Ernest Holmes. The first time I read this, like usual, when something goes deep for me, I usually get mad at it. And that's my signal. I've learned to really listen to that. If I have a resistance, I go right for it. I think that the resistance that I felt here, according to all the notes scribbled around this passage in the book, of my copy, is basically, I did not think originally it was just that simple. Oh yeah, change your thoughts, change your life, how about that? But it comes with practice. And this book is really important to me, and that class, the Essentials of Ernest Holmes, became a really important class for me, because it was the catalyst, the turning point for me to actually go in deeper within myself and find who I really am, and that's my essence. But for me, what started to come up first was all of the things I did not like about myself. Do you happen to know, you don't have to tell me, and you don't have to raise your hand, but do you know, are you familiar with what it is about yourself you don't like? I mean, okay. So we've got, that's good, because some of us are, some of us might be afraid to admit that, like something bad's gonna happen if I admit that there are things about myself I don't like. Because I could come up with them real fast, especially at the beginning. Are there things about myself that I don't like? And what do I do with that? So for me to get beyond that, I ended up, my biggest question in life turned out to be not so much, what's wrong with me and what was I thinking, although those became habits, was who am I? That was the biggest question. Who am I? What am I here for? What am I supposed to do? And I feel like at least, the people that I've talked with for quite a while, it seems like there's these two reference points that could be, that are common ground for struggle. One is, as soon as I get there. I'll do that as soon as I get there. It's all gonna be fine as soon as I get there. I'm gonna have that house when I get there. I'm gonna have that car when I get there. I'm gonna have that family when I get there. And it's too late. No, it's too late. It was too late for me. I remember thinking it's too late at 17. And then I remember in my 20s, it's too late. I'm 25, 35, 45. It's too late. It's too late. And I could be tempted today, to think about how too late it is, or when I get there. And I do, again, love to catch myself thinking that, because what's the most powerful moment? Now. This is the most powerful moment. And I have to get into that real quick, right? Because the past is gone, and I love that as long as I'm thinking about the future over and over again, it's just really going to stay there. It's always going to be in the future, right? But if I can stay in this moment, and nurture this moment with the truth of who I am, it just kind of unfolds, right? So, so my question was, who am I? Who am I? And I could actually come up with the things that I didn't want to be way faster than the things that I knew that I was. And something occurred to me. It was, I had a birthday, and it was about, I guess it's 2 years ago now, around this time. And I was getting, my phone was blowing up. I was getting all of these happy birthdays, Facebook, and I was overwhelmed with absolute depression. I was like, I don't know these people. they don't know me. If they really knew who I was, they wouldn't be saying they loved me. They were showering me with love, and I was just thinking, you know, it was overwhelming. In that moment, I was just having an overwhelming time. But I also was in transformation, finding myself, right? Or I should say, myself was really all there, but coming to a place of an awareness of who I am. And I was overwhelmed with that. And the way that I ended up dealing with it was, I thought, okay, there are all these people that don't know each other. And I was told a long time ago that when two or three people tell you the same thing, it's the voice of God, right? And so I thought, well, a lot of these people don't know each other. And so I sat down and I made a list of all of the compliments that I was getting that day. But more importantly, I was taking it, you know, I like to go to the extreme most times. And so I was taking it to the extreme. I was going all the way back to when I was a child. And I was thinking of all of the compliments that I had ever gotten. And that was without reservation. In that moment, I had already believed that none of it was true. So I didn't have reservation. And I am going to ask you to think about those compliments. And I'm going to ask you, as you think about those compliments that you've received your whole life, be aware of all of what I call editing, which is, well, yeah, but, well, that's not true. They did say I was pretty good, you know, or, well, I think I'm talented, but if they really, you know, it's the yeah, but, and it's all, that's the editing, you know, well, they, you know, any excuse that kind of rubs against the compliment, just the compliment itself is what's important to think about. And so I made a list of all the compliments. And I ended up returning to that list often while I was taking this class, and then more so later, and started realizing that, you know, this question I've been asking my whole life, who am I, who am I, who am I? God has been answering my entire life through you, through all of these compliments. I am loved. I am, and specifically, you know, whether it's smart or talented, you know, even in this moment, I struggle telling you what I know my compliments are. So I know it's a very vulnerable activity, but it was really a turning point for me, because then I had something to hold on to and learn how to love. Because if I made the decision to believe that these compliments were true, that these things people were saying, they didn't know each other, there was no reason for them to lie, the general consensus was this list over a period of years, decades, I made the decision to believe it. And so then I started to get to know myself. I started to embrace that, those qualities. And then those qualities, which always were God qualities, transformed into God qualities in my consciousness. Does that make sense? And then I began to fall in love with myself. It happened eventually, either by me just walking away because I'm afraid he's going to do it, or he's going to do it because creative process. You know, that ultimate love is answering my every call. I wouldn't call it a desire, but it's definitely a call. I'm putting the call out, right? You know, but what's behind that fear? Directly behind the fear is the ability to connect with Rick. That's one of my core gifts, is the ability to connect with him, to love him, and to receive his love. That's why I like to shine the light on the resistance. If I can see what the resistance is, I can get behind it, because behind every resistance for me, there's something real, real good. That God, for me personally, I head into that direction.
What was really interesting to me is my greatest fear in the compliments were actually given and kind of dispelled it.
So one of your greatest fears was within the compliment. Oh, I see what you're saying. You wrote down your greatest fear, and then the compliments ended up dispelling it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is kind of what it was all about, right? Does that make sense? The Alchemist. I never say his name, I don't know how to say the author's name, Paulo. This really great guy named Paulo.
Dude.
He's really awesome. I love his whole name, but I'm gonna say Paulo. Tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself, and that no heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams, because every second of the search is a second's encounter with God and with eternity. I'm going to read that again. Tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself. So, we go deeper. It's been a theme of the year. We go deeper, and I know that when I go deeper, I always feel a little bit of discomfort because things are starting to shift and transform. Sometimes I actually experience a bit of pain. Sometimes it's, on occasion it's a physically transforming amount of pain, right? But get to the other side, and once at the other side, we've all experienced transformation to where it's real uncomfortable. I mean, am I right? Has anybody just gotten there with no discomfort? And so, because I just want to be your friend. So, it's a little bit of pain, right? Tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself. And for me, the fear of suffering has always been worse than suffering itself. Although I have to tell you that sometimes transformation is absolutely 100% uncomfortable. I have never felt so naked than I have during moments in this last 3 years of digging deeper. I have never in my life, and there were moments that I thought I would never feel okay again, honestly. But I kept doing the practice. I kept doing exactly what I'm telling you. I kept making the decision to embrace myself amongst self-hate. Self-loathing is one of my favorite words. It means intense dislike for oneself. I am very familiar with self-loathing. Intense dislike for oneself. I never want to become unfamiliar with it because I don't hang out there anymore, but I don't want to forget, because it took some real transformation to get out of that illusion of what I was defined by. So yeah, sometimes it's pretty painful, but it's still, on the other side of some of those moments, I can tell you, looking back, it's less suffering than regret. Regret is a big thing of suffering, isn't it? It's a big, regret can make you suffer. So tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself, and that no heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams. Now for me, it was just a dream to be connected with myself and not knowing where I was going to go from there. And I still kind of don't know, but I can tell you that it just sounds unbelievable for me to be able to tell you that. For the most part, I live from my essence today. It doesn't mean that I don't have these moments where, I go back to what is wrong with me. And sometimes I have bouts with that. Recently I had a bout with that just persisted for well over a month. What is wrong with me? But applying my spiritual practices and applying the truth of who I am got me through the other side of that. And as usual, I have a whole slew of new lessons that, I'm just sucking on. Like a piece of candy. Do you know what I mean? So you've done a practice. You have written down some of the compliments that you received your whole life, and you have visited a fear, a big fear, and hopefully you have at least challenged yourself with the idea that on the other side of that fear is one of your biggest, one of your greatest assets, your greatest core gifts, or your greatest essence, whatever word that you want to use for it, is on the other side of that big fear. And so the spiritual practice that I'm going to offer you tonight is for you to take that list and continue continue building it, you know, and don't get discouraged if you're like, I just can't add to it. That's fine. Go back to at least with what you have, honor it. Because that's you. That's you, boo. That's you. And practice that self-love by looking eyeball to eyeball with what everyone else sees you as. Because we sometimes seek validation outside of ourselves over and over again until we either hear something that we're willing to believe for a second. It's never gratifying. It always goes away and we have to go back for validation. You give yourself the validation that you deserve by looking at that list or knowing the truth of who you are, and you won't have to seek outside yourself quite as often, right? So that's my thing for you tonight. So again, I would close with the spiritual practice of just meditating and listening and answering that question. The question, who am I, is already answered. Who am I is already inside me. And when I forget that, I can go back and know that God has been talking to me my whole life. I've been asking the question and I've been answered my whole life. You know, and so I want to encourage you to get to know yourself in that way. And then just to wind it up with the creative process is, I'll end with this story. The reason why that self-love is so important to me, and the creative process, how it relates to that, is I didn't really have a motivation doing any of the classes to do anything, to be anyone. I just kind of ended up getting into classes and digging deeper, and then I kind of fell apart, so I needed to be put back together, so I went to the next class. And what happened for me was profound. I ended up truly having a connection with myself. And the surprise that came along was I learned that I could have something sustaining with you. There was going to be no more discarding. There wasn't going to be any abandonment. All those childhood fears and things that had kind of perpetuated throughout my life up until then, because of the way I was believing, when I dug deep enough, I realized none of those things were sustaining because of the relationship that I have with myself. And so I learned to have a relationship with myself. And because of that, everything became sustaining. And so the story is, with self-worth, is I used to really rely on outside opinions on the way I dressed, and many other things. But especially, I was in a long-term relationship at the time, and was told quite a bit, not told, but suggested quite a bit on what to wear. And so I've always wanted to wear a certain type of pants. And I didn't really know that until I started doing this kind of investigating on myself. Self-love, blah, blah, blah. And I figured I found this pair of pants that I wanted online because I don't like to shop at the store. And it was a pair of men's pants. And I knew the size and I knew the look, and I just knew that these were the pants. And so I was going to go out and buy them, which is a big deal because, I normally need someone else's approval. So I went to the store, the Nordstrom's, where they were supposedly sold, and it wasn't. They said that they didn't carry that, those kinds of pants at that particular Nordstrom's. It was going to be another one. Well, I normally wait till the last minute to do most things, and I had a gig the next day, and I needed these pants for that gig. And so I was like, well, let's look at whatever else you've got. So I'm shopping in the men's section, really struggling, trying to not have, an anxiety attack, because of what my fear is what everybody thinks of me being in the men's section shopping. But it's exactly where I want to be shopping. And so I continue trying to nurture that part of myself and allow myself the freedom to do that. So we're shopping. It turns out I'm starting to have fun because I'm making friends with all the people. Oh, you got this gang of helpers. And so this girl decides she's gonna go check out, she's gonna go for me to the discount rack, and she comes back, somebody had returned the specific pair of pants that I had picked out on the internet to that location. So it was my size, the color I wanted, only one on that rack. Things don't happen like this all the time for me, I know, it's just one of those stories. But so I bought them, of course, and they were perfect. I did such a good job. And I was so, and then I went from there to buy a pair of men's shoes, which became even a bigger deal than the pants. And the men's shoes, pair of men's shoes that I've always wanted, always. I went and bought, and I felt so good. The next day I got to wear that outfit, and I can't tell you how good I felt. I didn't think at all what other people thought. And that, to me, that was a big deal, you know, because that's all I thought about up until then. And I just like rocked it from the inside out in my little world. It just did not matter. And I cried actually on the way home from that shopping experience. I bawled because of self-worth. Like I ended up just bawling. I had this pair of shoes that I'd never had before in my life that I wanted forever, and I just started crying because I got them for myself. I did this for me, knowing, and before I needed someone else to validate and to do, that I had enough there. And I don't think be able to articulate that moment to you, but it meant the world to me, and I knew it was transformative. And so now my big saying is, it's gotta fit me better than my pants. So I'm gonna sing a song for you.